let the dogs out. Like, who let the dogs out? Who?
Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com. Your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. Always available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Always available wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
All righty, welcome to the program. Tennessee with a bounce-back game to behold, one that I can't imagine being much better, as the Vols, after the heartbreaking loss to Georgia, Caleb pretty much, except for a special team score, I guess, did about everything they needed to do, and were in control throughout the game, despite the emotions of senior day and the emotions of losing to Georgia, and a better defense than most people realized going in. This Tennessee team took care of business, and it was maybe close for a little bit around the third quarter, but for the most part, Tennessee was in control throughout.
Yeah, it's funny because you watch the second half of the third quarter on, and you wouldn't know that Missouri kind of looked like they were going to do what they've been doing to teams all year. Tennessee's the first team in the SEC to beat them by more than one score. And I thought, I don't know if you ever find yourself being accidentally right, because I guess I could say I was right in that I took Tennessee to cover and I took the over, but I didn't think they'd drop 66 points. I did not think they would score more than they've scored last year on Missouri. And, when Missouri scored that touchdown to make it 20-24, it's like something with them kicked into high gear, and then they just went bang, 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 and just broke it open.
Yeah, there were a couple of things schematically. The one long Jalen Hyatt touchdown, that's a schematical thing. There were other times where I thought Tennessee was just the more talented team, whether or not you're talking about the group of running backs that now we need to include Dylan Sampson in that group, even though he hasn't touched it as much this season. But just that's an incredible trio of tailbacks that Tennessee has. Yeah, their receivers are pretty darn good. Princeton Fant catches a touchdown pass. Jacob Warren. I sensed early, there was the very first catch. I don't want to put too much on one play, and we want you to be sure and subscribe, share, and be sure and hit that like button, because we're going to break down the game here for you, and we appreciate you being a part of the show. With Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. Again, subscribe, like, and share. But there was a play, and this is among the many plays, one that is easy to overlook. But there was a play in which Jacob Warren, on the very first drive, second or third play, caught a pass, could have easily just gone out of bounds and made sure not to go out of bounds and tried to run over about 3 Missouri players. I thought that play embodied what I'd heard from Tennessee's camp all week, and that's that they were darn mad that they believe they were being disrespected, that a lot of people thought they had been exposed, so to speak. And we talked about that's the most overused term in sports, and I thought about it, and you're right. But they felt that way. And no matter if it's right or wrong, that's how they felt, Caleb. And they played like an angry football team today on Saturday.
Yeah, and let's not understate who they did this to. I mean, again, this is a Missouri team that hasn't given up they hadn't given up more than 26 points to any team in the SEC this year. And all the advanced metrics showed that their defensive line was as good as any defensive line in the SEC, including Georgia. And I thought Tennessee's offensive line just manhandled them on the ground. I'm not going to lie. Yes, there were a couple of sacks that were allowed, but for the most part, I mean, they ran the ball when they wanted to run the ball, and they threw the ball when they wanted to throw the ball. And that was because of the line up front was dominant.
Now, the announcers, and I do like Gary Danielson a lot, but the announcers brought up the idea of sportsmanship. So let's address that right now. And we want to get your thoughts. If you want to post in the message board, do so. Go ahead and we'll get your thoughts. Tennessee did not have to score the final touchdown that they scored. Caleb, sportsmanship-wise, did you have a problem with it?
No, because it was their backups that were in. I mean, my thing is, I firmly believe if you have a big lead and you will put your backups in, you have free reign to do what you want to do because you want to develop those guys. And I'm sorry, that's what you do.
I completely agree with you. And Gary Danielson, usually I have the TV down, but we're I was
Was
moving.
that Danielson? Wasn't it I think it was the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, what's his name? His
I can't
name
even remember.
escapes me. Coach to Colorado forever.
I can't even remember the name now. But I mean, it used to be Craig Bolichak and Spencer Tillman.
Rick Neuheisel. I'm
Rick
sorry.
Neuheisel.
So
Okay,
we
that's
put it all on the wrong guy, and everybody dislikes Gary Danielson anyway, so it doesn't matter. But Rick Neuheisel, I'm sorry I misspoke. I really do like, and I know that he's kind of this new age type of guy, but probably a little bit more old school than you might think, simply because of his age. And with Neuheisel, thank you very much for that, Elias. Mental just craziness there as we get stuff on offthehooksports.com. We want you to check that out, the written content as well. But he said that, basically you should take a knee in that situation on the goal line. I'm with you, Caleb, and it may rub people the wrong way, and it may end up making Josh Heupel less popular in coaching circles. But the simple fact is, if your backups are in the game, run your offense. Find out if Joe Milton is 110% ready before you go into the opener in 2023. Find out what offensive linemen are ready to step into a group that's going to have to be rebuilt. I've got zero problem with it. Now, it may make him unpopular. It did Steve Spurrier. Spurrier did the same thing. He did a lot of that. He continued to run his offense against teams that could not match him when his backups were in. His backups probably could have won by 20 points if they played the entire game. But I got no problem with it, Caleb.
Yeah, no, none whatsoever. I remember watching the 30 for 30 documentary on the U, and it reminds me of you probably know about this. I wasn't alive, but where Jimmy Johnson ran it up on Jerry Faust in Notre Dame, like in 1985, wasn't it? And everybody got mad, but apparently Johnson pulled the starters early in the third quarter.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like the rule. I think Tennessee will get a little bit more of a break because I do believe it from 1985, seeing the newspaper clippings. The rule at the time was, oh, no, Miami's not allowed to run it up on Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame was allowed to run it up on whoever they want because they're Notre Dame. But, how dare you do this to the great, beloved Notre Dame? And I don't think anybody's going to treat Missouri like that.
Elias brought up a good point. He said, regardless, I don't think you can have an entire system built around the idea that you have to impress the media and then be criticized for it. So not exactly the media, Elias, but you're referring to the college football playoff. Caleb, I don't believe that they scored that extra touchdown to just impress the college football playoff. I believe they were just running their offense. And you're right. I hate the term style points almost as much as you hate being exposed. that term. But I do not like the term style points. I thought that was an excuse for a lot of teams to run up the score when there was the BCS system. Supposedly, the college football playoff should overlook that. Supposedly, a 30-point victory is no different than an 18-point convincing victory. Supposedly, that victory that Tennessee had today against Missouri is about the same as Georgia having Tennessee in hand the week before. That's in every committee member's heart. Now, here's the difference. The AP, I think, took those scores into account a lot. And I think coaches did because every game wasn't televised. But goodness gracious, if those committee members if they're not watching every single game that they have to concern themselves with, then something's very wrong.
Yeah, that's the job of this committee. Is to watch. They say they watch every single game during the week, and you're right. It's and so they should take that into account. I remember those BCS days because the first 4 years they literally had a margin of victory part of the formula, of the official formula, which was the most looking back, that's the dumbest thing anyone's ever done in a formula. If you want to do a formula, fine, but having margin of victory in a formula is so stupid, and particularly was back then because it forced teams to leave their starters in. And I think that's how Nebraska got in over Oregon in 2001 to face Miami, when Oregon probably would have lost to Miami, but they wouldn't have lost the way Nebraska did.
Now, Elias post again, I don't think you're being critical at all. He said, I've been in enough work meetings to know better. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And if that's 39-16 instead of the final score that ended up being 66-24, it could have been an equal beatdown, but it's easy to say, whoa, they hung 60 on them. You're right, Elias. I understand that, but as that's the narrative. But these guys are, they're 20 people on that committee. Their job is to watch every single game. And you can get and by the way, they don't have to spend 3.5 hours doing it like we can do. You can get the all 22 if you want to and watch it in 30 minutes with the time taken out. So that to me should be out the window. Beating somebody handily is beating somebody handily. I don't look at this win over Missouri because of the score much differently than I look at Georgia the way they beat Tennessee, because I didn't think either game was in question for longer than 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. And the only reason this one was in question too, let's not forget, Tennessee had a few miscues in the second quarter and earlier in the third
Jalen
quarter.
Hyatt had 2 really rare drop passes, which is going to happen. That's when they were going to pull away.
Yeah, they were going to break it open then. And yeah, Jalen Hyatt has 2 drops. Then you have that sack and penalty-ridden opening drive in the third quarter. Those 2 plus the first quarter when they got down into the red zone and Josh Heupel went for it on 4th down. I thought he should have kicked it then. I mean, I get the analytics of going for it, but I'm thinking kick it, get the 2-score lead at that moment. So again, the crazy part about this game is Tennessee left points on the field. They could have won this game like 83-17. And so, Missouri's lucky we're talking about 66 at this point.
Yeah. And the whole, listen, and this is an SEC opponent too. Now, if you're playing UTC, I kind of get it. I probably would call the dogs off a little bit more, but this is an SEC opponent. They show up, they have scholarships too. So, and let's not forget, Elia Drinkwitz went on the Jim Rome show and made fun of Tennessee and their NCAA issues. I don't know if you remember that. It was before the season started.
That's right.
We talked about the maybe extra Stoops touchdown against Kentucky. Don't think that doesn't go through your head. And I got zero problem with that. There are a lot of people out there that don't know that I don't like them, but they might one day. And so, that's Joey says, I want to see what Drinkwitz has to say about it. He's going to say something goofy.
There's also, let's not forget, I think Josh Heupel might take this one personally too. Remember, if I'm not mistaken, he was a candidate for the Mizzou job after they fired Barry Odom when he was at UCF. And they went with Drinkwitz because Josh Heupel was an offensive coordinator at Mizzou and had done really good as an offensive coordinator at Mizzou. And so, yeah, there's probably a little Missouri was going for a creative offensive mind, and they went for Elia Drinkwitz over Josh Heupel when they were thinking of that. And
yeah. Okay. So your thoughts, put it on the message board. Who stood out to you? What did you like about this game? Are you surprised at all? What was the score in last year's Tennessee-Missouri game, by the way, Caleb?
62-24. They surpassed last year's scoring and total yards.
What did somebody on this very channel pick as the score for this game? Do you recall on Friday?
I do not recall.
I said I'm taking the exact same score as last year, and you looked at me like I was crazy because of Missouri's defense.
My God, you're right.
I'm terrible at picking games, but when I do actually get one right, I'm going to roll with it.
Dave, you got to start gambling with this because I've had a bad month, man. And you talked me. I was going to take the under in Missouri to cover, but Tennessee to still win comfortably. And you talked me into taking the over in Tennessee to cover. And thank you for that.
Well, there was a little birdie who told me on campus within the football program, and he didn't even like spending the time talking to me. And usually he's very courteous with his time. He didn't want to speak to me. He was mad still on a Thursday about Georgia. I thought that there was a very good chance that Tennessee would come out angry and mad. And they did. And you talk about could they have scored 80? I'll say 3 things. 1 Jalen Hyatt drop, 2 Jalen Hyatt drops. He had 2, which is not going to happen again in a game. And the emotions of senior day. You take those three things out, they might score 100. I mean, this is not
true.
Never going to be a close football game.
They looked, when Missouri scored and made it 28-24, I think we were all watching like anything can happen in a football game, but everybody watching that game could tell Missouri was so lucky to be in it at that point in the third quarter because by all accounts, Tennessee had dominated. And the thing that really stood out was the one issue Tennessee had, well, outside of their secondary, which I don't think you can fix. I just think they have issues back there. But linebackers struggled with containment on Brady Cook for a little while.
I
And
noticed
then,
that.
yeah. But then they adjusted and they kind of were like, okay, Missouri's running the same play every single time with Brady Cook. And
You know what's funny that I thought about that Brady Cook thing is that maybe they didn't really respect him. They respected Jaden Daniels. They respected Anthony Richardson earlier in the season, LSU and Florida's quarterbacks respectively. And they thought that, hey, that's a way to lose a game. I don't and give Cook credit, he made plays. I don't think they were scared enough to be perfect in gap integrity.
No, I agree. Because they were good on running, like on actual design running plays, not where Brady Cook scrambled. They were actually tremendous on those. I mean, they stopped, I think they came away with 4 3rd-and-1 or 2nd-and-1 stops. One of them ended up becoming a touchdown because on 4th-and-1, Missouri threw it and Jalen McCullough took the worst angle I think I've seen a safety take since Raheem Moore for the Broncos in 2012 against Joe Flacco. And
back.
yeah, remember that one, the Hail Flacco play?
I don't. So who out of this game stood out to you? I could go with the obvious, Hendon Hooker. I thought he was his usual steady self, and he missed a couple of balls, but for the most part, really bounced back. I was really impressed with him. As far as who else stood out to me, I mentioned the running backs. We could say the receivers every week, so I almost took everybody. Caleb, is there anybody in particular that stood out to you?
Literally everybody on offense stood out to me, but because Brew, McCoy, and Jalen Hyde both go over 100 yards. Princeton Fant, he had scored in every single way except catching passes, except the receiving touchdown as a tight end, and he scored 2, and one of them was a really good catch. And if there was an award for, if we still had the fullback as a designated official position in college football, and there was an award for the best fullback, Princeton Fant might win it because he effectively plays fullback for Tennessee right now, and
yes,
they use him in every way. I want to give a shout out on defense to Tyler Barron. He had 4 tackles for a loss in this game, and he had a sack. And I think one of the things that really stood out was as Tennessee started to build their lead and the linebackers did focus on gap integrity, like we talked about, they turned the pass rush loose, and Tyler Barron was the one who benefited the most from that, and he went off, and I got to give him some credit.
Yep. So, and then I thought Byron Young was disruptive. There are a couple of injuries that we want to keep an eye on. I think Amari left at one point. Is that correct?
Yep. The 2 Briarcrest kids, Amari and Jabari.
Okay. So Amari left at one point, so we'll keep an eye on him. Could you tell what actually was wrong with him? I couldn't see at that point.
I'm worried it's like a collarbone or a shoulder or something like that for Amari Thomas. But I don't know. So we'll have to see how that goes. With Jabari Small, I don't know how any idea on Jabari Small or how long you think he's out.
I would just be speculating at this point. He is a guy that his body is probably maxed out in its ability to be durable in football. You added the 15 pounds of muscle, but at some point your frame is only so big. So I think he has to find a bit of a niche position. I think Tennessee should also consider a little bit more of Dylan Sampson and Jalen. No, excuse me, brain slipping. Jalen Wright. Yeah. I think Justin Williams Thomas is going to redshirt, but Jalen Wright, I would probably lean on Jalen Wright a little bit more to make sure that Tennessee is fresh for, and they've been very fortunate on injuries, to make sure they're fresh for what is going to be, I believe, a college football playoff that they're going to be a part of.
Yeah, they're not going to really need Small the next 2 weeks. If he's banged up, save him. I was a believer in South Carolina early. I think that, Dave, you ended up being right. I don't see how Tennessee struggles with South Carolina next week. I don't think they're that good. And also, to be fair, remember when we talk about Jabari Small, he's playing a role that he wasn't supposed to play. because Lynette Whitehead was going to be that short yardage back to gain those yards on 3rd and 1 and on the goal line. And he got hurt at the beginning of the year, and there's no other real power back in the system. So Jabari Small has taken on a role that he's not supposed to take on. He was just the best equipped to take on that role this year. But I think Tennessee can handle it with Wright and Sampson now.
Patricia asked, what are your thoughts about Joe Milton? I think he's incredibly athletic. If I had an arm like him, I would probably just be in the backyard throwing the football all day long and get nothing done work-wise. The jump out of bounds at Ole Miss makes me wonder about his in-game thinking. That is my biggest concern with him. And I hear a lot of people from inside the program really like Taven Jackson. Now, everybody believes that Nico is going to step in and it's going to be his job, and that may be the case. But I love Joe Milton. If you took that one play out, I'd say he's your starter next year, no doubt. But that one play, man, was a big one against Ole Miss, jumping out of bounds. That's the last thing you want to do. Caleb, in closing, anything that you want to add?
A couple of college football playoff stories I think we need to keep an eye on. Tennessee kind of lost a quality win, if you want to say today, with Kentucky losing to Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. That's a bit harder of a win to sell now, because I thought Kentucky could have flirted with the top 25, and no, they're not going to be a quality win anymore. LSU holds on against Arkansas. That's a quality win. And I think this is the hardest thing to do, but I think every Vol fan needs to root hard for Alabama. Tennessee needs the best resume it can get, and that means they need Alabama to beat Ole Miss.
Well, and then there's Texas TCU. You would like for TCU to lose. There's no question about that, because you don't want this coming down to a second SEC team that has one loss and an undefeated TCU team, because I'm afraid that wouldn't break the Vols' way. Now, you still have Ohio State, Michigan that are going to play each other before the end of the year, so we'll see.
But if Ohio State, Michigan play it really close, like 40, like the 3-point game either way in overtime, you look at that and you look at Tennessee's loss that was convincing to Georgia. We all agree it was a bigger blowout than 27-13. It's not a guarantee Tennessee gets in over a one-loss Ohio State or Michigan team.
Oh, I agree. No, I totally agree. If it's close, if that game is incredibly close, then the Big Ten is having the same discussion we're having in SEC territory, and that is two teams in the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. I think that is very, very possible. So you want that game to be one-sided. Doesn't really matter who you root for. You want TCU to lose. I think if those two things happen and Tennessee does what it needs to do, bingo, bango, you're in. Don't worry about it.
Exactly. And if TCU loses and if Oregon loses again, which is possible, they got Washington tonight, watch out for Oregon, because even though they're behind Tennessee, they're about to have a chance of 3 more quality wins, plus including a Pac-12 championship game, when Tennessee will not be playing in the SEC championship game.
Be sure and hit that like button. That certainly helps us out. Punch on that like button, subscribe, and share. Set your notifications on, because I've been saying this for a while, but we've got some big-time additions coming to the channel. So be sure you have your notifications on. You never know when we'll bounce on. I'll promise you that we'll be on at 8:30 each and every weekday, 8:30 Eastern time. Time zones are important. Take that from somebody who's been dealing with people across the world. And also, I want you to be sure and take note that we'll be with you after each and every college football playoff. So before I sneeze, for Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Tennessee wins, and wins convincing, 66-24. And I think I picked what again, Caleb?
Yeah, I think you picked 66-20, or you picked 62-24. So nice call.
It's pretty good.
I think you're holding back making us money, Dave, because we could game the gambling systems, but you just I guess you have too many morals.
It's not the morality issue. It's just I know that there are big buildings in Vegas for a reason. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Have a fantastic evening, day, morning, whenever you're watching, and like, subscribe, share Off the